I have been joined by Duncan Amoah, who is Executive Secretary of COPEC. Good morning, Duncan.
Dziffa, good morning and another week.
What do you mean by another week? We are alive.
Another weekend. It's good to see you. Good to be back here. Good to be back here.
What do you mean by another week? You didn't even let me ask you the questions
I know where you are going, so probably just to aid free movement, yes.
Okay, so we'll start off with the BOST MD's resignation. We found out that the MD of BOST resigned on Friday, and IES director is saying that his resignation is not surprising at all. So I'm reading from citynewsroom.com, and it says here, the executive director of the Institute of Energy Security, Pakwesi Anamwasechi, has said the resignation of the managing director of Bulk Oil Storage Distribution, BOST, comes as no surprise to him. George Mensah Oakley is said to have tendered in his resignation to the president on Friday, August 23rd, 2019. That's literally last Friday. Reasons for his resignation are unclear. However, there are reports that it may be linked to an issue of contracts at BOST. So I'm going to quote exactly what Mr. Amoah said on Eyewitness News about Mr. Oakley's resignation. He says, BOST is a very complex thing and equally polarized with personal interest. It will require a lot of work to be able to manage interest there. The MD's resignation does not come as a surprise because if you understand BOST very well, it is a system where people have different interests. People come to you, the managing director, everyone behaves like a special advisor to you. You get good advice, and there are people who even want to be MD, and so if they find you to be not in a strong position and you are not well positioned to understand the industry well, they will mislead you. He goes on to say, for now, we have not been able to reach Mr. Oakley himself, but the information we have received is so scanty. We initially picked information that it was over contracts issued, but as to the exact contract, we are yet to find out. So Duncan, talk to us about BOST and why is this no surprise at all to the director of the Institute of Energy Security? First of all, are you surprised by this? This is like the third CEO we've had at our MD we've had at BOST in this administration's lifetime.
Dziffa, let me start by saying BOST is gradually gaining notoriety for all the wrong reasons, and it's becoming more or less a very dangerous business ground. If you look at the object of setting up BOST since 1993, when GOIL had to actually pay for virtually all the tanks that BOST had to set up. You look at 26 years down the line, you look at how well GOIL is doing and how badly BOST is being managed, and you ask yourself what is going amiss. BOST was set up for three key reasons. One, to hold strategic stock for Ghanaians, such that if at any point there's any conflict anywhere and a reason why Ghana cannot receive fuel through any of our ports, we would have enough fuel at least to run all of us between 8 to 12 weeks, 2 to 3 months. As we speak today, there is not a single gallon of strategic stock at BOST. So first object, completely at variance with the current happening. Again, BOST should develop infrastructure, pipeline and transmission infrastructure to ensure that there's fuel availability across the length and breadth of the country. If you ask how that has been done, the answers are not very far from another failed attempt. As we speak, pipelines are not working. Even if BOST was doing so well, Ghanaians should see BOST at least taking on some of the road projects, because you have your trucks, hauling fuel from Tema to Akosombo to Takwa to Kumasi to Wa to Tamale across the length and breadth of the country. And so developing pipeline infrastructure and other transmission systems to ensure that fuel is moved from across the country should have also been keenly pursued. Unfortunately, we've deviated on that also. Thirdly, you are expecting BOST to at least be in a position to ensure there's fuel security for everybody in the country, and even work hard to mitigate the harsh fuel pricing situation we have in the country because of economies of scale. They have a larger, storage space in order to be able to hold fuel for some time, and when prices even go up, they could decide to flood the market with whatever stock. Unfortunately, that role is also not being done. And so when you move away from these three core functions of your setup, and now it's become a situation where whichever political party is in power, right from the presidency down to the constituency person, everybody feels they have one business or the other to do with BOST. Unfortunately, I have on instances come across negotiations where politicians seeking to supply fuel to BOST come with their own prices, sometimes $10, $30 above prevailing market prices. Don't forget, there are private BDCs who are also bringing fuel. Yeah. And so if they go to negotiate at Plat -10, right? And I am a politician, because I have the BOST MD or the board in my corner, I can sign an agreement with them and say, I'm also bringing you fuel. But instead of Plat -10, which another BDC is getting it for, I am going to deliver at Plat +10 because I need to make profit. Once that happens, BOST is cut out of the trading scheme. So they can no longer be competitive on the market because nobody will want to buy Plat +10 when there's Plat -10. And so political interference, right from the presidency down to constituency people who feel they are empowered, who feel we've brought the government to power, so we need to go in there and get our share of the cake. That should cease forthwith, Dziffa. In the absence of that, BOST will continue to operate as a very dangerous business ground.
So are you saying that BOST should be able to operate independently from political
Exactly,
influence?
Dziffa. Exactly. If you look at the private depots across the country, Chase, Sahara, all of them, you do not find them in such awkward situations where instead of day sourcing for fuel at efficient prices, people are interfering. Unfortunately, BOST has become a dumping ground for political heavyweights who feel the oil industry is money, so we go in there, and even if our terms are not attractive to the market, we'll still bulldoze our way. And woe betides a CEO if you do say no to some of these heavyweights.
Why?
You are in trouble.
But that's your job. You are there to actually protect BOST's interest, not the interest of a politician, no?
Dziffa, until we come to that discussion that says politicians stay off BOST, we'll go around in circles. We'll go around for a very long time. Because, again, right from the ministry down to the constituency, right from the presidency down to the ministry, right from political appointees or actors, everybody thinks, well, BOST is a business ground. Let me go in with one thing or the other. And so I have said, just like Tor has been left crippled, BOST is on a failing mission. And it doesn't look as though we are even putting strategies in place to bring it back to profit ways. A job that could easily be handled by 400 workforce. Today, as we speak, almost 1,000. And so once you increase overheads, right, what happens is that the company will continue to bleed. No matter the revenues you raking from private BDCs who come to do their throughput storage arrangement with you and stock their fuel with your depots. Whatever revenues you generate, even your workforce remunerations will take all of that. So you might not have anything to embark on pipeline infrastructure development. You might not have anything to embark on road development for these trucks that haul or move product from one town to the other to be able to use them. And so what is happening currently is a situation where people only go in there, one procurement breach or the other, one self-interest or personal interest or conflict of interest or the other being served by either managing directors or
but
the board.
If politics is the issue, why can't we just say, or why can't maybe the head of state just say, politicians stay away from BOST, if that is the variable that seems to be the problem?
You see, Dziffa, BOST has become a dangerous business ground, and I would repeat it severally. It's become so because at the end of the day, the MD is appointed politically. And sometimes people we appoint in there, if you look at their pedigree, you wonder if this person should be coming to a sensitive establishment as BOST. When we also get lucky to appoint people with a pedigree, the systems that hover around would not allow these persons the freedom to even work. Because people come in with demands. I want my truck to be the one hauling fuel from Accra to Kumasi every day. So give me about 10 loadings every day or 100 loadings every day. If you don't do that as a managing director, you are in trouble. There's been instances where managing directors also themselves are seen engaged in the same businesses that the transporter should be doing. So they buy trucks. He's the managing director, the one giving their locations. He buys the trucks, and it's rather the one moving the products, just so he can make whatever profits back. So people go there, self-serving, self-centered, conflict of interest situations are bound.
Okay, so we have also been joined by Justice Abdullai, someone I have not seen in a long time. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I do miss you, though.
Oh, God.
That's what you meant.
I didn't even ask you that.
That's what
We're talking about the resignation of the BOST MD. Any thoughts on it? It happened on Friday.
I honestly think my brother has really exhausted the discussions on this, and I was so enthused listening to him narrate how our politicians would always run down our institutions. I have had several occasions here. I've been literally lynched in this studios for blaming our politicians for the troubles that we go through. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'm the only Paul in this industry preaching the word of God to the rest of our citizens. And so clearly he has drummed home the fact that the troubles we face with BOST is the same troubles we face with TOR, is the same troubles we face, indeed, even with GOIL, that seems to be doing well. If GOIL has this level of independence and autonomy that is required to run it, it will be doing far better, far in excess of what you are presently seeing. But unfortunately, as my brother has already said, for the interference of an MPP and an NDC wizard who feels that that is the place for him to make his income because he has toiled for his political party. We appear to hold more affiliations and indeed loyalty. I mean, sense of fidelity to our political parties are way in excess of what we should have for the national interest.
Well,
we do not care.
There's a man who agrees with both of you, and that's Dr. Steve Mantiao, who is the chairman of PEOC. We're going to talk about what's going on at GNPC, and I need you to provide some clarity on the annual budget funding amount. So I'm reading from page 3 of the Chronicle, and it says Nasikano Wahin, and it has to do with some $655 million that were not utilized. So this was in 2017. So he says he contended that in 2017, out of the total oil money transferred to the annual budget funding amount, 403 million was not utilized. In 2018, an amount of 252 million out of the total figures transferred from the same account was also not utilized. So together, the 403 and the 252 came to be 655 million that were not utilized. Now, his question is, the finance ministry is saying that the money had been logged into the treasury accounts, but he's saying that there's no documentation to support this claim, and that money should actually had been sent back to the Petroleum Holding Fund. Can you provide some clarity? Does it matter where the money is held? Should the Ministry of Finance provide some documentation to prove it? And he even goes on to say that if the money actually exists, then there's no need for the Ministry of Finance to even come back to say, we need to borrow more money to support the budget, because we could have just used the $655 million that's left over.
You see, the ABFA is basically how much of our oil revenues we use to cushion our budget. And these are monies that you use for specific projects in education, in health, and they have some thematic areas that you're supposed to invest in. I have read reports from PEOC where you read in the budget, we have expended this amount on a certain school here. PEOC will drive there to go and have an assessment of whatever project, only to get there and there's not even the land.
Wow.
And so what we put, right, in our official books and what really prevails on the ground usually are totally different. And so if you recall, when the finance minister goes to parliament to read the budget, what becomes quite synonymous with everything is roads. Do the Pepease Road, Nkwanta South, German North, they'll catalog a number of roads that are either being fixed or have been fixed. But usually if you go around to do your own spot checks, you would realize that what they said they have used the budgetary fund amount for and what prevails on the ground are totally different. If indeed $650 million US cannot be accounted for, we cannot tell how the money has been applied, and we go back on the financial market to raise bonds for 400 million Ghana cedis, 650 we are not able to account for adequately. And then we go back to the financial market and say we are going to borrow 100 million, 200, 1 billion cedis, when the 650 on its own could give you about 3 point something, almost 4 billion. If these monies cannot be accounted for, I would recommend that Parliament immediately give PEOC certain powers to hold people before the law courts, certain powers to drag people to explain to the courts how some of these funds have been applied, because it's become one too many, and it's year on year that you hear these reports from PEOC. We said we're going to do this borehole for $150,000. There's no borehole. There's not even the land to start with.
Okay, so we have to go for a quick
Dziffa,
break, and then you continue your thoughts. I still have with me Duncan, Amoah, Executive Secretary of COPEC, and
the
Council.
The big man.
Justice Abdullai.
Simply
Don't
because
go
she
anywhere.
misses me.
And of course, if you have any questions,
just
let us know
make it so
with the
obvious that you
hashtag
miss me.
Breakfast Daily, and the
Because indeed I
WhatsApp
do
line
miss
is
you. But I miss you,
0550
we both
585
miss Dziffa.
832.
I don't even know why
We'll be
she's
right
so-
back. Welcome back. This is Breakfast Daily on City TV. Thank you so much for staying with us. And as always, we want to hear from you because the conversation has to be interactive. So if you have any questions, comments, or contributions to the conversation, we want to hear from you. Use the hashtag Breakfast Daily and the WhatsApp line 0550-585-832, and I'll be sure to read them out for you. I still have with me Duncan Amoah, who is the Executive Secretary of COPEC, and Justice Abdullai, who's a private legal practitioner. Before the break, we were discussing what's going on at GNPC. So there are some funds that are left over that's called the annual budget funding amount. Clarify for me if I get it wrongly. And Dr. Steve Mantiao, who is the chairman of PEOC, is saying that that money should be held at a specific place. But the finance ministry is also saying that according to, and I'm going to read the act, it says there, Public Financial Management Act 2016, they are not allowed to transfer unspent funds back to where it came from. So who is saying what? Do they have the right to say? And he's even saying, just show the documentation that this happened.
You see, Dziffa, what happens with the ABFA, right? We've taken funds from our oil proceeds to do certain specific things.
Yeah.
Mind you, those funds are not meant for consumption.
Okay.
So
What are they meant to be used for?
For capital investment projects, infrastructure, and all of that.
Okay.
So you cannot take that fund and say you've paid teachers with it. It's not allowed.
Okay.
The law is clear that after 20 years of exploring oil, Ghanaians should be able to fill a certain infrastructural presence, what we've used their oil revenue or proceeds for. And so if you do say you are going to dig a borehole or put up a 6-unit classroom block or put up a health facility or engage in some road infrastructure, the evidence should be on the ground. If at the end of the accounting year or financial year, you have not applied the funds for the purposes for which you had indicated you were going to apply them, the decision is that the funds will still be available. So alternate application of that fund is not allowed according to the law. So you cannot say that I'm going to build a borehole. The people didn't like the borehole, so I've used the money to pay the teachers in there. It's not for consumption. So if the projects are not available to be cited, expectation is that the finance ministry will provide evidence of proof of those funds either sitting in the holding account or availability of those funds, proof of it. So if you cannot prove that the funds are available, you cannot also show the projects that you had indicated you were going to commit these funds to, then clearly PEOC would have every justification to say that the funds have been either misapplied or they've been stolen or the funds have been, misused.
But can the finance ministry just say, listen, whatever the case may be, we have the right, let's just move on?
You see, the finance minister spends according to law. That is why he cannot take NHIS money and apply it to football. They may have equal benefits to the people if people are exercising or playing football. So you can't use NHIS money to develop football pitches. You have to apply it for what it is for. So if ABFA says apply these funds for 4 thematic areas, be it education, health, or whatever,
that's where you should.
It means that you should have a need for those funds in certain specific projects. If you come out to say that I'm going to use them to build a 6-unit classroom block in Dziffa's hometown, because the people would need that, the schools under trees over there is a worrying situation, and PEOC goes back the year after to check what you said you were going to apply the funds for, and they don't see the school, what it means is that the funds should still be available. It doesn't matter whether you went and Dziffa's community people, most of them were in hospitals, so you needed to pay for their health care. It is not for consumption. It's for capital projects or investments. If you don't get to show that, then clearly either the funds have been misapplied or chopped in plain language.
Let me bring Justice in here. So Mr. Steve Mantia was also saying that GNPC should be weaned off government influence. I'm sure you agree, so take it from there.
Yeah, naturally, it fits into all that we've been discussing. Government unreasonable and unnecessary interference in the scheme of our corporate industries. But I would like to directly link this with Dr. Mantia's position on the way the annual budget and funding has been used. If you check from 2011 or 10, when the reports started emerging, it has been the same every single year. The same narrative. Nothing has changed, actually, for the past 8 years.
Why? Is it the lack of willpower, or people are benefiting from the system as it is?
Exactly why I wanted to tackle this matter.
Okay.
The first is the biggest challenge with PEOC itself. With lack of resources, with no means of their survival, and no teeth to bite. This is how the politician can make you and break you. So they give you with left hand, and then they take it with the right hand. PEOC was established to expose, and this is where the rot started, to expose some of these rots happening within the oil and gas, industry, let's put it in general. Now, but except that in this case, it's the upstream that we are concerned with, not necessarily the downstream. Now, however, it was set up such that even though it's supposed, with the authority and then all these powers to have access to documents, have access to information, first, they do not get these informations. They can chase one single document, and for a whole year, you will never have it. Unfortunately, they do not have the teeth to bite, to threaten, or to do anything else that could get them the document they seek to obtain.
Exactly.
This is the biggest second challenge. In fact, as a matter of fact, for about 3-4 years, they didn't even have an office.
But shouldn't they be collaborating with perhaps maybe the Special Prosecutor's Office so that if they identify something, but then Mr. Martin Amidu is also having he has his own challenges that he's facing as well.
As a matter of fact, that is what they have been seeking to do, I think, for the past 1 year or thereabout. They've been seeking to collaborate with Martin Amidu to prosecute some of these matters. But I see a bigger challenge because there's a grey area. And this is it may be debatable, but however, this is how it look like. A finance minister may not be able to account for, may not be able to show you that he used the funding for A, B, C, D. And so usually this is what they will do. They'll come telling you that they use it for capacity building. This is the biggest way of stealing our money.
But capacity building, is that the same as capital investments?
No, but that's the point I'm making.
As he's saying, it's supposed to be spent on capital.
No, there are thematic areas for the expenditures to be made. And one of them is education. Now, under the education, they will never tell you, they will come under capacity building as part of the education. This is what they do every year. This is a fraud being perpetrated on us.
Well, we do need to invest in our human capital, no?
Most of it. I can understand. So, you see, he puts it quite bluntly when he puts it that it should rather reflect in infrastructure. But the law doesn't really say that it should be infrastructure, as a matter of fact. It simply tells you, you spend the money on education, spend the money A, B, C, D.
Energy, blah, blah, blah.
On all those matters. Now, with the education bit, that is where all the money goes. All the money. It goes into the education. And when it goes there, about 60%, when it goes there, they will tell you it's for capacity building. It simply tells you the money, those that can be accounted for and those that cannot be accounted for all being used. Now, the difficulty is how the Special Prosecutors Act says that he's limited to corruption and corruption-related matters. Yeah. Now, if I tell you the money has been used for these areas, it is not corruption.
Of corruption. That's true.
So the person they seek to help them to chase these politicians is incapacitated also because of the act setting it up.
So should it be the Attorney General's office?
So the point, as was being made the other time, is that it should rather be PEOC itself that should be capacitated in order to be able to take, in fact, active role in the prosecution of these matters. Now, it sounds like then every institution is asking for authority to be able to prosecute. Unfortunately, that should be the case because the Attorney General's office is inundated with cases that they are even unable to handle. And even those that they can handle, they are simply, for whatever reason, political reasons most of the time, are unwilling to do so. So the best way out is to ensure that some of these independent institutions, or at least as we seek to make them, should have those prosecutorial powers, like the way Forestry Commission is asking for independent prosecutorial powers, the way Yoko has been given that small amount of autonomy, but which is still under Attorney General anyway, and then also expand the breadth of the special prosecutors' areas, so that it should not be limited to the things that people who would want to be smarter can always get away with. Imagine the other time the Special Prosecutor's Office was even contesting whether or not he can even prosecute matters relating to the PDS. I mean, these were, for me, unnecessary limitations, a clock on the interpretation of the law. Because so long as a matter borders on fraud, borders on corruption, borders on stealing, I see no reason why anybody should interpret the law to limit the ambit of that law to encapsulate such persons.
Okay, perfect. So we have to move on to the next topic. So
she's always gagging me. And
Seven-member committee formed to investigate alleged rosewood smuggling. I'm reading from citynewsroom.com, and it says, government, through the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, has inaugurated a 7-member committee to probe allegations of rosewood smuggling in Ghana. So it follows a US-based environmental investigation agency's publication that alleged that rosewood smuggling is rampant in the country despite the ban. The committee will be headed by the Deputy Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Benito Owusu Bio. And of course, speaking at the inauguration, Sector Minister Akua says committee members had 5 weeks to investigate the issue and report their findings. So I'm going to quote him briefly. He says, the specific task for the committee are to investigate allegations of corruption as reported in the publication by the EIA, that's the Environmental Investigations Agency, examine all anomalies in respect of rosewood salvage permit, transportation and export trade. Investigate if rosewood is still being traded in spite of the ban I imposed in March 2019. Make all necessary recommendations for appropriate action to be taken. But according to DCE of Bulsa South, he is saying that 20 trucks of rosewoods are hiding in Bulsa South. So I'm going to read briefly. It says the district chief executive of Fort Bulsa South of the Upper East region, Daniel Kwame Garba, has dismissed claims that, well, he's dismissing it, that some 20 trucks loaded with rosewood are hiding in the area despite the ban of the felon of that kind of timber. According to him, such a consignment would have long been seen. So there was a whole lot of back and forth on Eyewitness News last night of the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources and Forestry state agencies impounding some 20 trucks. So he's saying that some state agencies impounded some 20 trucks, but the DC is actually saying that no such thing does not exist. So Duncan, please provide some clarity. So let me quote Mr. Garba. He says, I can confirm that harvesting of rosewood doesn't happen in the district. Bulsa South is not too big a community where 20 trucks will not be spotted. We share border with other communities. When I had the information this morning, I checked around within Bulsa South. There was nothing like that. There are communities around where this could be happening. Anybody who knows Bulsa South knows 20 trucks loaded with rosewood cannot be hidden. So there are allegations that, you know, we impounded 20 trucks. The DC say maybe it's happening in other communities, but not us.
You see, Dziffa.
And I even think the MP of the area also came out last night to say that the minister, you know, is under some sort of, it exists. There's no need to even have a committee. They're happy they have a committee, but the issue of people actually selling rosewood illegally, it's actually happening, and people are demonstrating against it.
Dziffa, the comedy of errors, the jokes in this country, they are becoming one too many. You don't need a committee to stop people from logging wood. You don't need a committee. The Forestry Commission should be up and doing. If indeed we do not want people to make rosewood an endangered species, or to continue just felling them and making proceeds without anything to the state, there's a way to stop it.
And it's not with the committee?
Without committees, Dziffa.
How?
You see, we arrested a certain Aisha Juan's sister. I don't know if you recall
Helena
that
One.
incident.
Yeah, Helena One.
With about 40 trucks.
I don't think they're sisters. They just have the same last name.
That's what Ghanaians were eventually made to accept. We arrested her, having done the illegal thing. What happened to her? We just allowed her go. Yet, if a Ghanaian went into the same forest to get one, the laws will hold this person. Police will take this process this person before court within 72 hours. In fact, before 48 hours, your docket will be ready. Yet people have 20 trucks. These trucks don't belong to aliens or saints or angels from outer space. These are people who are known. If it is not among themselves, if it is not a trade, right, that is duly supervised by the high and mighty in the system, clamping down on it is not that difficult. Except to say that if I go to arrest 10 trucks with rosewood, a certain influential person will come behind me to say, look, if you don't live there, you see what I'll do to you. As happens even in the oil industry. You have illegal operators who are backed by stronger forces, sometimes within government, sometimes within the higher echelons of power. These people get away with even murder. They will get away with anything. So this whole committee exercise, I am not too sure we should waste the taxpayers' monies any further. If they want to fight rosewood, right? Dziffa, it's not one of those things like a diamond you can just put in your pocket and walk away without being searched. These are heavy trucks, right, that come to pick these logs. We see them. The police barriers, the police checkpoints, we see them. Yet it's still ongoing. It means that anybody that is able to move rosewood from one district to another to probably Temaport for whatever export must be a very powerful person. Or else you won't go through all these road checkpoints, road stops, Forestry Commission, out there in their numbers, checking people are preserving our forests and all of that. People won't get away with murder if they do not have that connection to higher echelons of power. And so, Dziffa, let's stop this whole mockery of an exercise called committee and whatever. The actual work is on the ground. You've arrested 40 trucks by Huang. We don't know where those trucks eventually have gone to, whether they've also vanished into thin air or turned to Kokonte, as we've seen happen with cocaine issues in the past. We do not know. But the joke is becoming not funny anymore. If you want to clamp down on them, you arrest 1, 2, prosecute. I'm sure justice here will be very happy to send such matters to court, even for free. If you want to do that, you can. But if you don't want to, don't come back, bugging us with committees and go and pay them certain allowance. It's a waste of everybody's time.
So Justice, there's an environmental group that's saying that we've cut down about 6 million of our rosewood and exported them since 2012. And it takes about, 100 years to grow this wood. What exactly have we done wrongly? Because, we've placed a ban on it. How can people keep getting away with trading and exporting rosewood illegally? And will this committee finally be the answer we need to the problem?
Unfortunately, I find it difficult to subscribe to the idea of setting up a committee to investigate this. Unless, there are reasons for setting up committees. Committees are set up for special matters and to bring facts that are ordinarily not known. And then, usually, to make recommendations for the possible way of resolving matters for which they were set up. Now, Dziffa, tell me, how is it so difficult to know where a rosewood is locked, how it is hauled, and how it leaves the jurisdiction of this territory eventually, without anyone noticing it? Of course, unless they were wearing masks. The woods were wearing masks, or probably had some invincible permits around them. It's almost impossible sometimes to understand and appreciate the thinking that goes into some of the things we do and some of the decisions we take. I'm here wondering, as big as a log could be, as big as it could
because
be.
It's like it's not like a small.
No, it's not a pencil. This is a pencil. The pencil can be in my pocket. You're talking about a log,
And not one, plenty.
and you're talking about. And you see, sometimes it's so difficult, it's so disheartening being a Ghanaian. When you hear some of these.
Or maybe people are not able to identify that it's rosewood, so
yes,
I don't know. It's
wood,
big, but it might be wood.
Yeah, but every wood, whatever the name, whatever the nature, whatever the circumstances of a particular wood, it goes with a certificate from the day it is chopped off
down
from its mother branches to from every single station. In fact, the Forestry Commission gives a certificate of it based on which every police station or checkpoint would allow this to go all the way. And then, and these certificates would usually include the nature of the wood, the names, where it is coming from, the person transporting it, the owners. In fact, all the particulars that you need will be on this certificate. Now, it is this certificate, including the bills that you ought to even pay, are all stated. It is only with this certificate that you can be allowed to transport one wood, regardless of the name, however endangered it may be, even if it is the most abundant of all the woods we have. And so it is almost impossible to even believe that woods of that nature can leave the jurisdiction when we have Forestry Commission officers all over. We have policemen all over, and we have immigration officers all over. So you ask yourself, are all these persons compromised such that these wood can leave the jurisdictions of the police, the jurisdictions of the immigration officers, the jurisdictions of the Forestry Commission? Are all these line of persons from wherever it is locked, wherever it is coming from to the last destination? It is impossible. Unless
someone is...
Unless... Unless.
Or at the top somewhere.
but touch on the Tumu residents for us, because they are also protesting. They were protesting yesterday about a Chinese company called Bachopong Lee Song Kun. And they're saying that, I hope I pronounced it right, they are engaging in...
I feel it's so wrong. It sounds too like Bachona.
They are engaging in all kinds of processing of timber, and it includes rosewood. So yesterday they came out and even said, we don't want them operating here. We don't care about jobs being created. Shut them down in 7 days. And then the MCE came out to say, oh, we've shut them down. But should it get to a point where Ghanaians are protesting before we do the right thing of just shutting down these companies that are actually hurting us as a nation?
Under normal circumstances, it shouldn't be the case. It should be the case that the people who claim to lead us should be at the forefront of the leadership role by ensuring that our resources are protected and our interests are first served before any other interest. But I feel that sometimes, from where we are, it is rather the citizens who have to lead the leaders, because we have bad leaders, we have corrupted leaders, and we have leaders who do not care at all about anything beyond what they get for themselves and their family members. And so it gets to that point where indeed you and I would have to get up and then do some of these things.
But has it gotten so bad that we don't even care if these companies are going to provide jobs for us anymore? We're just like shut down.
Survival goes beyond jobs. And so let's focus on the bigger picture. Survival goes way beyond that. The bigger picture is this. But we need to go into, sometimes when it has to do with natural resource generation and the way they are utilized, I think the community ought to have been involved even in the first place before these companies were set up. That's how it goes. The community is involved. The stakeholders are invited for roundtable discussions, and then they are informed of the company's presence, how the company is going to manage their resources within the area, and how they are going to contribute to everything else in the area. And whatever the concerns of the community is also addressed at that meeting. Now, usually, the company would provide means of reclaiming the lands and other things, because it has to do with exploiting the soil. Now, these ought to have happened. And I'm beginning to believe that from what you're reading, clearly this didn't happen. Because if it had happened,
at least
they would have known about the presence of the company. They would have known about the company's intentions way before they even set up. They would have known about how they are going to contribute to their development, the development within the area, and not necessarily job creation. Job creation has always been used as a basis for exploiting the weak in society.
Okay. But please wrap up for us.
And so for me, I think we should be engaged in more of these dialogue than not necessarily allowing people to take up arms and chasing up foreigners. That is not the way to go. That is not the way to go. But unfortunately, we have to come to that point because the people who are supposed to ensure that the right things are done are not doing the most appropriate things. And that's how some of these things would result.
Duncan.
I'm tired though. You live in a country where the very simple things become very complicated because certain oga or guess strong men, big men, are able to influence virtually everything. It does not make sense that rosewood can find its way being transported all across. Nobody gets arrested, nobody is prosecuted, and we are forming committees to go and drink tea, and what are we investigating? The joke should stop. If they want to act, they will act. If we want to stop rosewood felling or logging, we will. But if we don't, we shouldn't come back and tell Ghanaians we are forming committees. There's nothing in there. The people who engage in these acts, there's no way a Chinese or an Italian company can come and set up deep in the forest if your big men are not behind them. Thank you, Dziffa.
So do you think maybe we should legalize it if people are still going to go ahead and
Dziffa, there's a clear reason why you ban such a thing. There's a good reason. to protect your forest and also to ensure that you don't make that wood, which is quite expensive, extinct in no time, because people will go for that any day. So whilst protecting your environment or your forest, you're also looking at a way not to make the log itself extinct. Unfortunately, the more you ban, the more you apply the laws, the more certain people who are bigger than the laws go behind all of us and get away with murder.
Because what I'm saying is the state is not getting anything from all this extra.
But the actors are making money. The big men are making money.
And the saddest part is the means of banning it. If you ban by simply a fiat, it does not become a law. In fact, it's as useless as the paper you wrote on. So if you intend banning, make it rather unlawful. Because just mere letter writing and saying that you have banned it does not change the status quo. It's actually, and that is why people would even continue to do what they do best, because really, even if you arrest them, you cannot prosecute them for anything.
Wow.
Because they've not breached any law. They've not breached any law. It is just your orders that they've decided to breach. Okay. And if I've decided to ignore your orders because you're a minister, so what? What can you do?
Okay.
The best they do is simply take the logs and then tell me they are not going to release them.
Like they did with Helena.
And that's all they could.
Okay.
But unfortunately, you would always have a minister called the minister of, what's it called? Is it the prime minister or the other minister?
It's okay. We have to end it here. Thank you
that kind of
very
person
much.
who will tell you that foreigners are more important. Senior minister will tell you foreigners are more important than your nationals.
Private legal practitioner and Duncan Amoah, Executive Secretary of COPEC. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Adam, for joining us. We will be right back.
That person